Great. Well, it's wonderful to be with both of you tonight. I would like to introduce the audience to two very special guests tonight. Our featured speaker is author Gwen Rippon, who is the second daughter of Dianne Struble, the middle girl of the three little ones who cheered on their mother during her swim in 1958. Gwen is an author, storyteller, and co-owner and operator of a small dairy and beef farm in Schuylerville with her husband, Don Butler, and her daughter, Holly Rippon Butler. And we have a surprise guest tonight. And seated with Gwen is her lovely daughter, Holly. Welcome, Holly. And I'd like to introduce the audience to you as well. You are a very accomplished woman, and we're very glad that you could be with us tonight. Holly is Dianne Struble's granddaughter, as well as Gwen's daughter. In addition to her job advocating for policy change with the National Young Farmers Coalition, she lives and works on the family dairy farm in Schuylerville. Holly also has her own small craft ice cream business called Farmer's Cone Creamery. So welcome to both of you tonight.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you. I wanted to start out our interview tonight by saying that as a little girl myself, growing up in Glens Falls in the late 1950s and early 1960s, I remember very well the story of your mother. My own mother, who graduated from high school in 1958, thought that Dianne Struble was a real heroine to young women. And so it's very exciting and gratifying all these years later to have the honor and privilege to interview the daughter of Dianne Struble, who was a real legend in my growing up in this region, and to talk about this wonderful new book that you've worked so hard on over the last few years. So I'd like to start out, Gwen, by posing this question to you. Tell me about yourself and why you decided to write this book about your mother and her Lake George swim.
Okay. Well, you've introduced me, so you know a little about me. It's been a personal journey for me. I wanted to know more about my mother, and I got to be in my 60s, and I realized I didn't really know a lot about her Lake George. And Lisa Adamson from the Lake George Historical Association, she and I met, and we got interested in setting up an exhibit at the museum. And she asked me if I would write this book. And at first I was hesitant, not sure that I could do it, but she nudged me along, and she got the funding from the Struble Family Foundation, and we started out doing it. And also, it originally started out as a book, a double-part book with Louise Rourke and her swim. But she was very supportive too at the beginning. And her book will be coming up soon as a separate book. They each needed their own space to go.
Gwen, for some of our viewers who may not be familiar with your mother's very daring and heroic accomplishment, can you give us some details about what happened in August 1958 on Lake George?
Well, Lake George was a very different place. I interviewed a number of people and researching this story, and I found out that Bev and Tom Roach were very helpful in describing what the Lake George story was like. It was essentially their own little private lake, and the east side of the village was dark after Labor Day, and people kept their vacancy signs up until everybody was full. And it was at a point in history, a pivotal time, when the school was just about to blossom into a real first destination. And there were a lot of colorful people in the area. And so this event was a mixture of this special place, Lake George, this beautiful lake, and the time that she lived in the 1950s, and my mother and these other characters who happened to be there, and they all played a part.
And your mom had attempted to swim Lake George some years before that, but in 1958, at the age of 25, with 3 small little daughters, she climbed into the lake, and many, many hours later, she swam the entire length of Lake George. It's a remarkable achievement. And what does that mean to you and your family when you reflect upon that?
Well, it's always been something that we were very proud of. But I didn't know very many details until I started researching and writing this book. And I have found many wonderful things about his story that I'm so happy to pass on to my family. Different quotes that I found that she had said, and I never knew. You never know who you might inspire. And if I can convince even one person that faith can move mountains, this swim will have been worthwhile for that reason alone. Mm-hmm. And she said she had this wonderful philosophy about how to have serenity in your life. She said, just close the door on the wrong train of thought. Concentrate on now, and it will take care of itself. And these were gifts that I uncovered that I was happy to discover, and I'm happy that I can pass them on to other people. And Holly, maybe you'd like to describe what it was like for you to read the book, the story.
Oh, yeah. Well, and we were just talking about some of these quotes this morning, so they were actively being put into use. Very helpful. And yeah, I mean, the whole process of learning about this research was really interesting because it was turning a lot of stories that I had heard, bits and pieces of growing up, into a coherent narrative, which really, there were some surprising pieces of it. I had never realized that my grandmother was 25 when she did this. I think I learned that when I was 27, and it was a little shocking because I knew what it felt like to be 25, and this wasn't what I was up to. But I learned that, and really just understanding how all the pieces fit together of all these stories was really a neat experience to read that all in the book.
One of my favorite quotes from the book was a famous quote that your mother used to say. And she said, fear was not in your mother's vocabulary, you wrote. She said, I just won't live like that. Yeah. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, that was a very typical thing for her. I mean, from very little, she was an adventurer. She had a horse no one else could ride, and when she was very little, she jumped off the porch of the porch roof and with an umbrella, and fortunately only broke a wrist, but she was up for any adventure. But she really preferred the water. She was a natural-born swimmer, and throughout her life, she was fearless and fun-loving. And even when she was in her 60s, she went on a grizzly bear tracking expedition with the Endokina in Greenfield Center. And that was the way she was. An inspiration, really, that way. I was full of fear growing up. So
what led you to write your mother's story at age 66?
Well, a number of things. I became at an age where I was very curious about why my mother did this swim and what it was that made it such an historic event and what was it that captured people's imagination. And I wanted to know more about my mother, and I knew that I also wanted to know more about myself through knowing more of her story. So I got very curious, and as I turned over little bits of information that I discovered, one thing led to another, and I was introduced to Lisa Adamson at the Historical Association, and that's where I received the encouragement, and she got the grant from the Struble Family Foundation, and we set about to do it.
What did you learn about your mother that you perhaps didn't know before?
Well, I'll tell you, whenever you write a story about your parents and you put their timeline in front of you and you see all of the things that they did in one big picture and how many things they were doing at the same time, you really get to see them as a human being. And I gained a lot of respect for my mother by doing that. And it connected the dots for me. Like when I was little, maybe I wish she was there more for me, that I was more important than Lake George. But in the end, and through the process of writing this book, I came to see what a gift this room has been as an inspiration in our lives and in other people's lives. And I see the whole picture now, and I think it's just been a very healing in a way and inspiring story for me and others in my family, I hope.
I was really touched in reading your book, Gwen, by the honesty with which you wrote your mother's story. For example, you relate the ups and downs of living with your stepfather, Dean, and the abusive personality of your biological father. How did you arrive at forgiveness, and why did you choose to include these revelations in your book?
Okay, well,
Before you answer, Mom, can I just, we're hearing a lot of feedback, and I see there's a comment that other folks are hearing that too. I'm not sure how to solve it, but maybe, Terry, are you able to try muting while we're talking?
Okay.
I don't know if that'll help.
is that better? Okay.
We'll try.
So the question is, that sounds a lot better to me. I don't hear an echo. I chose to write about my whole family, and I've always, maybe as the middle child, I've always assumed the role of being the peacemaker. And so it was very interesting to me to write about, I think everybody is an imperfect person. We're human beings. And to show how we can live beyond that, we can see beyond that to the healing parts and to come to a love and understanding with our family members was always something that I've been very interested in. You need to unmute now. Thank you.
I would say, Gwen, that it's very brave. It's very brave, the way that you wrote about your family. And I think that one of the best things about writing the story of your family is doing it in a very true way, because it inspires others to reflect upon their own stories, their own families, and to do so in a very authentic way. So I really commend you for that. I know it wasn't easy. And certainly as an author, you now know that writing a book is almost like giving birth to a child. It's a long process, and it's somewhat painful and has its ups and downs. But the reward at the end is truly great and lives on in a lasting legacy.
Thank you. Well said.
Holly, I'd like to ask you a question. One of the most beautiful photographs in the book is the one in which your grandmother is holding you when you're just a baby, about 6 months old. What feelings does that image evoke for you?
Oh, yeah. I think you'll need to mute again, Terry. There. Yeah. The photo is really, it was really, I don't know that I had seen it before the book, or if I had forgotten about it. So it was really lovely to see that again. And I think I can remember my grandmother. I feel lucky to have memories of her. She was alive till I was in my teens. And she really, I feel like looked the same until she passed away, that she was very vibrant and healthy and was really taking care of her health and focusing on that. And so seeing her in the picture really doesn't look like seeing a younger version of my grandmother. It really feels like this is who I knew her as, and I can remember like she was very strong too, and so I think there's a very visceral memory of her hands and her strength that you see in the photo as well, that I have, that I'm really grateful for. And I think even seeing the photos of her in the other photos of her in the book, where she's very much younger and in a bathing suit and things like that, which were not how I saw her in my lifetime, but they make sense. They don't feel like you're looking at a different person. She still had that same energy of being very healthy and smiling a lot. So yeah, I think seeing that photo, it was really nice, and it just also made a lot of sense with who I knew my grandmother to be.
One thing I'd like to add, Terry, is, can you hear me? Is one of the other things I discovered during the book was the quote my mother said, "Swimming Lake George and being a mother were the greatest events of my life." I had never known that she had said that, and I found that both healing and, I was a little surprised in a way. I guess I didn't know what to think. I knew deep down that she always loved us. But it was difficult living with a person who was a celebrity and a strong character. And so that was a healing thing for me to discover that she said. So I just wanted to add that.
Take us back to August 22nd and 23rd, 1958. And recreate for us, as you do in the book, the excitement around your mother's swim. What was happening on the boat? What was happening in Lake George Village? What was happening in the media, on the radio, in the newspapers? Try to recreate that excitement for us.
Well, I'd like to read you maybe the first paragraph of that section of the book. So my mother was set to swim a week before she really started, but she came down with the flu. And so they had to hold it off for a little bit before they started. But imagine that the whole world or the whole Northeast is watching, and you have the support of Schaefer Brewing Company as your co-sponsor and the Lake George Chamber of Commerce. And there's this huge expectation on you to perform and swim this lake that nobody has ever swum before. It's 32 miles long, and you don't know if it can be done. But I know my mother was the type that she knew she could do it. She was rock solid. There was no doubt. But so here's the first paragraph of this chapter, The Most She Could Offer. At 10:29 a.m. on Friday morning, August 22nd, after coating her body with 5 pounds of grease to stay warm, Mom waded into Ticonderoga Creek at the far northern end of Lake George. Her swim started rather quietly near what is now called Dianne's Rock, which bears a plaque in her honor. She was accompanied by 4 boats, a VIP boat, a press boat, and 2 Warren County Sheriff Patrol boats. The first hint of excitement came as Dianne passed Rogers Rock Slide, where the passengers on the tour boat Ticonderoga crowded the railing, waving and cheering her on. And then during the night time, she swam through the narrow section of the lake, which is the coldest, I believe. It has a lot of cold springs. And when she emerged on the other end of the southern end of the Narrows early in the morning on Saturday, it was 60-degree water, and she said that was the most difficult point of her swim. She had to thrash around in the water, I remember her saying, just to get warm. And everyone was waiting for the sun to come up over Black Mountain. And also there were fumes from the boat, which were making her sick. And a lot of people thought she would not make it at that point. But my mom had read about the English Channel swimmers, the women who had swum it in the 20s. And she had made Paul promise not to let anyone pull her from the water before she was ready. She was in charge of her whole timing of her swim from beginning to end. And she was doing it on her own terms. And she was going to finish it no matter what. And it did take her 35 and a half hours. But she just did it on her own time and accomplished it. There was also, I might mention, Vaughn Langworthy he assumed the role of being a cheerleader for her. And at one point, after she came out from the Narrows, she had paused to get something to eat, and he said, "Come on, you got to get steamboating." And my mom was very witty, and she just quipped right back. She said, "If you're going to steamboat, you got to have steam." And there were a lot of humorous moments during the swim, too. She kept her wit throughout it all.
I saw Bridget's comment asking if I swim or paddle. And yes, very recreationally, but not in any competitive sense. And I did do swim team for a little while in high school, but I wasn't very good at diving. I got water in my ears, so that didn't go very far.
You were going to dive your own way like your grandmother.
Yeah.
I think your grandmother would be very proud of you, Holly, for sure. Oh, we have another question.
Yeah, I see how my mother's cousin, Jane Current, is asking how Dianne got started with distance swimming. Hi, Jane. So nice to see you. My mother was a natural-born swimmer. She actually taught herself how to swim, and her own mother would take her camping up in the Adirondacks with her grandmother and her sister, my mother's grandmother and my mother's sister. And my mom would just get in the water in the cold northern lakes and swim, and her mother would paddle alongside in a rowboat for safety. And that's how she got started. Bridget says you could paddle the lake very slowly with her.
Oh yeah, I would love that. Thanks, Bridget.
I can't hear you now, Carrie. Oh, there we go.
Gwen, as we all know, Lake George has called, so to say, many artists, writers, entertainers, athletes, and creative people with its magnificent landscapes and beauty. What about Lake George do you think drew your mom?
Well, she had this quote. She said, "I'd rather swim Lake George 6 times than once any other lake, to swim any other lake once." It was the fact that it was cold, clear water, and it was surrounded by mountains. She loved nature, and she felt like swimming is like just between you and nature and you and God. It was almost like a spiritual experience for her. And Lake George really drew her because of its natural beauty, I think, and the fact that the water was so clear and beautiful.
Following her fame in swimming Lake George, your mother also became a local celebrity through her work at Animal Land. Can you tell our viewers about that?
I could write 4 more books if you'd like. Her manager, Paul Lucaris, was the Lake George president of the Lake George Chamber of Commerce. He was a visionary and an entrepreneur, and he had started Animal Land in Lake George, which was right across the road from what is now the Great Escape. It used to be called Storytown, USA. And after my mother's swim, she became a celebrity, and she married Dean Rippon, our adoptive father. Paul offered us a place to live, on his park, at his park. And so our father built a cabin at the back, and my mother and father agreed to help perform for him. And so they were featured in the Alligator Adventure Show as Jane and Tarzan, and he would swing in from a rope up on a high ramp, and my mom would be in this beautiful bathing suit, and they put on quite a show. But we were all part of running Animal Land. My mom had encouraged Paul that we could do the work as well as his employees, and we began helping out with the chimp shows and the snake show. My sister would take a big snake down, and all kinds of experiences.
A friend of ours just sent me an article this morning, with an old article that had the headline like "Alligators Found in the Northway" or something. That there was a lot happening there.
I told you, 4 more books. No.
Well, we'll be ready for those. I can assure you. I know this book was going to be a bestseller. Gwen, many of the themes in your mother's life that are expressed in your book will clearly resonate with a whole new generation of women today. Single motherhood, divorce, raising children, earning a living, being in an abusive relationship, ambition, drive for self-improvement. What do you feel that these themes teach women today?
Well, I think one of the things about my mother was that she never let the circumstances of her life define her. She had a vision for herself, and she just went for it. And I think maybe that would be the inspiration for people to, especially women, that find themselves in those situations, to dream big and to follow your dream.
What do you think your mother would say about you writing her story?
I think she would be pretty proud. I really do think that she would be happy with it, I hope. What do you think, Holly?
Yeah, I think so. I think so too.
I can't hear you again. Oh, there you go.
What else would you like us to know about your mother?
Well, let's see. My mother's example, I think, shows us that we should have the courage to do what we dare, to follow our dreams. We should have the wisdom to get the help that we need, and we should have the determination to follow it through until it is accomplished. And my mother was, like you say in your beautiful introduction to the book, Terry, she was a maverick. She was someone who was willing to do things that were different, even if other people didn't agree with it. I mean, for a young mother with 3 young children, to think that she could just go and swim the lake and find her way, make her way that way, which was very different from what I think most mothers would do at that point in their lives. So I guess that would be it. Do you have anything to add?
Well, I think maybe not everyone knows that she lived in Lake George until she died, that she had a home just outside of town over by French Mountain. And so I feel really grateful having gotten to grow up in this area and to really get to hear more about the context of her story, but also to have known her in Lake George and continuing to live in the area as she got older, that it was, the attachment went well beyond the swim and her time at Animal Land. It was really where she lived and how I got to know her. And other things about her, she really was into philosophy, and I think, and self-education. And I remember that really clearly about her, just a whole room for books in her house, bookshelves, and she was always reading and quoting from different philosophy books. And yeah, as my mom said, going on grizzly tracking trips. And she was a really good cook, very particular, but really good at cooking. And yeah, really just enjoyed continuing to learn as she got older. Those are some things that I remember.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to talk about is the timing of my mother's book and her legacy. I don't know if that's one of the questions you wanted to ask, but is this an okay time to talk about that? Like I said, my mother's swim happened at a time when Lake George itself was blossoming into a tourist destination. And her story now is kind of coming back into view, into people's, whatever. People are discovering, finding out about her story, maybe for the first time, or maybe as a memory for them. But it's at a time when Lake George needs our help now environmentally. We've used her for 62 years. And if my mother's legacy can be that people are inspired to do something about the water, to keep it clear and clean and keep Lake George the wonderful swimming place that she had always loved, I think that would make her really happy.
Gwen, Gwen, I think that that's the perfect segue into letting everybody know how we can get a copy of your book. It's hot off the press. You are going to be doing your book launch this Saturday. So tell us where you're going to be on Saturday, how we can get the book, how we can get a signed copy, how much it costs, because I know people will be lining up to read this story about your famous mom.
Thank you. Yes, we're having a book launch at the Lake George Historical Association this Saturday from 10 to 3. It will be under tent and socially distancing with masks, but there will be an open mic. And the interesting thing about this, I will be signing books, of course, and the books will be available for an introductory rate of only $12 with tax $12.84. The interesting thing about this day, though, is that 2 other women have swum the lake since I wrote the book. And one is Charlotte Bryn, and she was not only the fastest, but the oldest person to swim the lake. And then Carolyn Block, who just swam the lake as a double crossing, which means she swam from Lake George Village to Ticonderoga and turned around and swam back to Lake George Village. So these are remarkable women, world-class athletes that will be coming to the book launch. So you'll have a chance to meet them and maybe hear them share something. And the really neat thing is, so my mother was the first person to swim Lake George, and at the book launch, we're going to have the last person, the fastest person, the farthest person, the oldest person, and they're all women. And there have been 8 women that swam Lake George. The first and the last were women, and only 6 men. So this proves it may be a very exciting event, and there will be people that are in the book that will be sharing. Mayor Blaze will be there, I hope. He plans on being there, and Eberhard Burkowski, a close friend of my mother's. And the weather looks great so far, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. You can also order the book by going to the Lake George Historical Association website, which is www.lakegeorgehistorical.org, and just either click on the book or under publications, and it will give you information. So
Okay, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. As an aside, I just wanted to point out, Gwen, for our viewers, that life in many ways is coming full circle with the introduction of your book and your book launch on Saturday. And to have Mayor Blaze, the nation's longest serving mayor, be there at your side will be a wonderful tribute to the longevity of his career and his passion for Lake George and all it means, because he was a young deputy for the village of Lake George in 1958 when your mother did her swim.
Exactly.
So it'll be very exciting to have him there. Gwen, in closing up, I would like to ask you to share about some of the plans you have for the Dianne Struble Honor the Lake Day.
Okay. Yes, I've had this dream of starting a Dianne Struble Honor the Lake Day, and it could be an event by and for swimmers, where we all come together to inspire young swimmers, either to want to swim farther than they have or to swim better. And also to bring attention to the water quality issues. And because we all love the lake, and the more of us that love the lake, the more of us hopefully will want to protect her. So I hope that other people with ideas will contact me and we can make this happen.
Gwen, Holly, it has been my great pleasure to speak with you both tonight. I want to congratulate you, Gwen, on the debut of your book, Called by the Water, When Dianne Struble Swam Lake George. I can't wait to get my copy on Saturday. My husband, Mark, and I will be there. And we are so honored to be able to take part in such an amazing day for your family, to honor the legacy of your mother, Dianne Struble, and all she meant. She belonged to your family, but she also belonged to the people of Lake George and our region. We believe she's a heroine. She's an inspiration to us still to this day. And through the pages of your book, you will bring a whole new generation to know her, to love her, to be inspired by her. And I'm very sure that your book will be a great influence in turning attention to the lake and the importance to the people of this region. And we can use your book as well to save our Lake George. So thank you both very much. Best wishes with your new book. And thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Terry, very much for doing the interview. And one of the pleasures of doing this project was meeting you. So, thank you.
Thanks, Terry.